A 7-2 Supreme Court ruling just changed the rules for every gun owner in America. If you carry a firearm and you don't know what this means, your next encounter with law enforcement could end very differently than you expect. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to break down could be the difference between walking away free and spending years in federal prison. Hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, do it before we go any further. I'll wait. Okay, let's get into this. So here's what just happened. The Supreme Court handed down a major 7-2 decision that touches two things at once. Your right to carry a firearm and the limits on what police can legally do when they stop you. That's a rare combination. Most rulings hit one or the other. This one hit both, and that's exactly why so many gun owners are either celebrating or panicking right now, depending on how well they understand what the court actually said. Let me give you the big picture first, and then we'll go deeper into each part. The case came out of a situation most gun owners will find very familiar. A person was legally carrying a firearm. Police stopped them. During that stop, officers searched for the weapon and used what they found, or didn't find, as a reason to extend the stop and dig further. The question the court had to answer was simple but massive. Does the fact that someone is carrying a gun, even legally, give police automatic justification to search them? And does a legal carry permit change what police can and cannot do? The court said no, and they said it's 7-2. That's not a close call. That's a statement. Here's the part nobody's really talking about. The margin matters. When the Supreme Court rules 5-4, it tells you the country is divided, and that ruling might not survive the next shift in the court's makeup. But 7-2? That's a signal. That tells lower courts across the country that this is settled ground. It tells police departments they need to retrain officers. It tells prosecutors they cannot build cases the old way anymore. A 7-2 ruling has weight that echoes for decades. Now let me break down the carry rights side of this decision first, because this is where a lot of gun owners are going to feel real relief. Before this ruling, there was a messy patchwork of lower court decisions. Some courts said that if an officer sees you have a gun, or finds out you have a gun during a routine stop, they can treat that as a red flag, even if you have a valid permit, even if you did nothing wrong, even if your gun was holstered legally and you were completely calm. Some jurisdictions were allowing officers to detain people longer, pat them down without real cause, and use the presence of a firearm as a reason to keep digging for something else to charge you with. The Supreme Court just drew a hard line through that practice. A legal firearm, carried legally by a person with a valid permit, is not reasonable suspicion of a crime. Full stop. The court said you cannot treat lawful behavior as suspicious behavior. And that sounds obvious when you say it out loud. But in practice, courts and police departments were twisting the logic for years. They were saying, well, we don't know for sure it's legal, so we can investigate further. The Supreme Court said that reasoning doesn't hold up. Here's what most people get wrong about this part of the ruling. This doesn't mean police can never ask about your firearm. They still can. It doesn't mean they can never investigate further if something else gives them cause. They still can. What it means is that the gun alone, the simple fact of it being there, cannot be the trigger for a search or extended detention. They need something more. And that something more cannot just be your nervousness or the officer's personal discomfort with guns. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in the next video where I break down the exact 5 words that can protect you in any police encounter involving your firearm. Subscribe right now so you don't miss it when it drops. Now, let's talk about the search boundaries side of this ruling, because this is where things get really interesting. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. You probably already knew that. But what counts as unreasonable has been argued in court after court for over 200 years. One of the biggest gray areas has always been during traffic stops and street stops involving people who are carrying firearms. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this clearly. Imagine you're driving home. Officer pulls you behind for a broken taillight. Completely routine. You inform the officer, as required in many states, that you are carrying a firearm and you have a valid concealed carry permit. Under the old patchwork of rulings, what happened next depended almost entirely on what state you were in, what city you were in, and sometimes what judge you might eventually face. Some departments would immediately ask you to step out of the car. Some would immediately run checks that went beyond the normal scope of a traffic stop. Some would pat you down before you even finished your sentence. This ruling changes that. The court said that the disclosure of a legally carried firearm does not, by itself, give officers the green light to escalate the encounter. The stop has to stay within its original scope, unless something else, something independent of the gun, creates reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. This is the part that shocked me when I read through the decision carefully. The court specifically addressed the idea of officer safety as a justification. For years, police departments argued that any time a gun is present, officer safety concerns automatically justify additional searches and extended detentions. The court acknowledged that officer safety is a real and legitimate concern. They didn't dismiss it. But they said officer safety cannot be used as a blanket override of Fourth Amendment rights. The safety concern has to be specific. It has to be tied to something observable about the individual situation, not just the existence of a firearm. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Every situation is different. Laws vary by state. If you're ever in a situation where you feel your rights were violated during a police encounter, please talk to a licensed attorney in your state as soon as possible. Don't try to handle that alone. But wait, there's something even more important that most people are going to overlook completely. This ruling doesn't just affect what happens during a stop. It affects what happens after. It affects suppression hearings. That's the legal process where your defense attorney argues that evidence against you was collected illegally and shouldn't be allowed in court. If police searched you because you had a gun and nothing else, and found something during that search, your attorney now has a much stronger argument to get that evidence thrown out. This ruling becomes a shield not just on the street, but in the courtroom. And for people who have pending cases that were built on exactly this kind of stop, a stop that escalated solely because of a legally carried firearm, this ruling could be grounds to revisit those cases. That's how significant this is. Here's a crazy stat for you. Only about 1 in 10 gun owners actually track Supreme Court decisions that affect their rights. That means 9 out of 10 people are learning about changes like this too late, or not at all. Don't be in that group. Join the tens of thousands of gun owners who trust this channel to break down exactly what these rulings mean in plain language. Hit subscribe, and you'll never miss another update like this. Now let's talk about what the 2 dissenting justices said, because understanding the opposition to a ruling helps you understand its limits. The 2 justices who voted against this decision raised concerns about officer safety. They argued that the majority's ruling makes it harder for officers in the field to make real-time judgment calls when they know a firearm is present. They weren't arguing that legal gun owners don't have rights. They were arguing about where the line is in a high-pressure, fast-moving situation. Their concern is practical. When an officer is standing at your window and you've just told them you have a gun, they are making a split-second risk assessment. The dissent says the majority's ruling ties their hands in dangerous ways. That's a legitimate argument. And here's why it matters to you. It tells you that this debate is not over at the street level, even if it's over at the court level. Officers are still going to make decisions in the moment. Some of those decisions will overstep what this ruling allows. That's going to create conflict. That's going to create more cases. And those cases are going to shape how this ruling gets applied over the next 10 to 20 years. So what do you do with this information right now? Here's the first practical takeaway. Know your state's laws on carry disclosure. This ruling protects your rights during stops, but it doesn't change whether or not you're required to tell an officer you're carrying. Some states require immediate disclosure. Some only require it if asked. Some have no requirement at all. Know which category your state falls into. Here's the second practical takeaway. Stay calm and stay within the law during any encounter. This ruling gives you legal protection, but that protection plays out in courtrooms and appeals processes, not necessarily in the moment on the street. The best outcome is always the one where nothing escalates. Use your rights. Know your rights. But don't turn a traffic stop into a constitutional test case if you don't have to. Third, talk to a local attorney if you carry regularly. Have that conversation before you need it. Ask them how this ruling applies in your specific jurisdiction and what they recommend. A 1-hour consultation could save you years of legal trouble. This information could literally shift very soon as lower courts begin interpreting and applying this ruling in real cases. Subscribe right now because the next video is going to cover exactly how state courts are already responding and what it means for your permit in your specific state. You do not want to miss that one. Let's bring this home. A 7-2 Supreme Court decision just gave legal gun owners across America 2 powerful protections at the same time. First, your legal carry status cannot be used as the sole reason for a search or extended detention. Second, police need more than the presence of a firearm to escalate an encounter beyond its original scope. These are not small victories. These are fundamental boundary-setting decisions that will shape how the law works for gun owners for years to come. But knowing the ruling exists is not enough. You have to understand it. You have to know what it does and doesn't cover. And you have to stay informed as lower courts start applying it to real situations. That's what this channel is here for. Hit subscribe if you want to stay ahead of every major ruling, every law change, and every update that affects your rights as a gun owner. Hit the like button if this video gave you something useful, and drop a comment below. Tell me what state you're in and whether you've ever had a police encounter where you felt your carry rights were questioned. I read every comment. Stay informed, stay legal, and I'll see you in the next one.